Good evening. I'm Councillor Jeremy Newmark, and I'd like to welcome members of the public, colleagues and officers to this meeting, those of you who are here in person and those watching online. I'll be chairing tonight, and in order to manage our business as efficiently as possible, I'll invite people to speak one at a time to ensure that their contributions are properly heard, so please don't speak unless invited to do so. Thank you in advance for your assistance. On hearing the fire alarm, please leave the building immediately using the nearest available exit. Do not under any circumstances use the lift. The assembly point is the area in the Civic Office car park next to the roundabout. You should not attempt to re-enter the building until it is known to be safe to do so. Agenda item 1, communications and apologies. There are none this evening. Agenda item 2, presentation of petitions. There have been no petitions received this evening. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest to declare? I'm going to declare an other interest as Chair of the Board of Elstree Film Studios and the relevant dispensation to speak on related matters. The immersive experience item is listed using the Elstree Film Studios branding, although the governance for that project will be separate, just in order to make things clear. Councillor Gray.
Definitely not Councillor Gray.
Councillor Myers.
Thank you very much, Chair. Similar. Council appointed Director of Elstree Film Studios, so I should declare an interest in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 4, speeches by non-cabinet members. Welcome to Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Clapper, Councillor Bright, Councillor Carser, and the other Councillor Carser, I can see in the corner. The usual rules apply. Non-cabinet member may speak for a maximum of 3 minutes on any item on the agenda, with a maximum of 5 members per item, no more than 2 from any one political group. Agenda item 5, minutes of the previous meeting. For accuracy only, are members happy to agree to sign the minutes of the meetings held on 10th of September 2025? Is that agreed? Thank you. I'll sign those after the meeting in the interest of time. Agenda item 6, recommendations from scrutiny committees. And this is indeed an auspicious occasion because we have the first set of recommendations from a scrutiny committee since our administration took over back in May 2023. But we got there in the end, and I'm pleased to invite Councillor Sullivan in a moment to present the recommendations from the task and finish group established by the Policy Review Committee to look at corporate communications campaigns. It's been such a long time since we did one of these, to remind members of the procedure, which is that we will hear the brief presentation and summary of the recommendations, which Cabinet will then take away and consider and respond to within an 8-week time frame. So there won't be any discussion or debate tonight. There will simply be a presentation. If there are any specific questions on the content, then I'm happy to take those, and the matter will come back to one of the next 2 Cabinet meetings by December 16th, I think, at the latest. Councillor Sullivan, I understand you're going to present.
Thank you, Chair. The report is under item 8.2 in the agenda. It's been listed twice, and you have all the recommendations in front of you there. The Policy Review Committee agreed to establish this task and finish group at its March meeting in 2025 this year. Members felt that communication material issued by the Council was sometimes ineffective, information was sometimes unclear, and pertinent details might be missing. This resulted in multiple inquiries by the public, both to members and to the customer services team, that could have been avoided by clearer communication. Members felt that member inputs into those materials would help reduce the volume of inquiries and complaints, ultimately improving the Council's reputation and reducing member and officer workload. Terms of reference of the group were agreed in June 2025, and meetings took place throughout this July and August. The key recommendations of the report focus on strengthening Council communications through clearer member involvement, improved project protocols, and increasing resourcing to deliver better public information and responsiveness, and are summarised on page 3 of Appendix A, with the reasoning and detail behind them on pages 6, 7 and 8. Scrutiny is intended to be a critical friend to the administration, and we hope these suggestions are received in that spirit. We recognise the overwhelming majority of campaigns launched by and materials issued by corporate communications are accurate, complete and effective. We also recognise that the team is working with limited resources. Our recommendations intend to make best use of our talented officers we have and the local knowledge they have, contacts and resident-led perspective that our members bring, and to help the Council produce even more effective comms in the busy months and years ahead. The recommendations are expected to improve efficiency and value for money by reducing a number of queries coming into customer services and avoiding reputational risks due to misinformation. This suite of measures offers a clear path forward for improving how Hertsmere Borough Council communicates with residents and stakeholders, making both policy and service changes easier for our residents to understand. The Scrutiny Committee would like to thank the members of the Task and Finish Group, which comprised of myself, Councillor Cohen as Chair, who couldn't be here tonight, and Councillor Maxie Allen for their time, effort and contribution. We'd like to thank officers for coming before our group and speaking in an open, honest and constructive manner. And most importantly, our Democratic Services Officer, Alex Moore, for all his hard work compiling our efforts into this report and ensuring we had all the resource and officers we needed to be able to work efficiently and produce this report. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Councillor Sullivan and the other members of the Task and Finish Group for the very thorough job they did on this exercise. Are there any questions in terms of the specifics of the recommendations from members rather than sort of discussion of the substance of them? Councillor Gray.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've sat on several Task and Finish groups in my time in this council. The one thing I think is missing and would be really useful to have sight of is the background paperwork that went to compiling the report that we see before us, because that doesn't seem to have been included. So we have the report, we have the recommendations, but there's not the evidence base to show how we came to those recommendations. And normally behind these reports sits the work of the Task and Finish Group set out of their findings.
Yeah, I think that was the case in the past. I think that we will liaise with Councillor Sullivan and the Democratic Services team to see what can be supplied to Cabinet in terms of a fuller report rather than simply the recommendations. Did you want to come back, Councillor Sullivan?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So at the Policy Review Committee that we had last time, the full report is in there and it's got all the links to all the background documents, so we can send those links across for you so that you've got it, because it is there. It's just not in this paper.
Fabulous. Excellent. Thank you very much. There's nothing more on that item. I am, with members' permission, going to make a slight change to the order of the agenda because we do have an item on the agenda, 8.6, in terms of non-key decisions relating to the retention and resurfacing of Newbury's car park in Radlett. And we've got Councillor Clapper, one of the ward councillors, who's played a central role in the work and the campaign around this. And so we have a very long agenda tonight. I know that she's under some time pressure. I'm very happy to agree that we take this item now. So if people are happy to proceed on that basis. This report is on page 233 of your rather extensive set of papers for this meeting. It falls under my portfolio, asset management and engineering services. Members will be aware that the facts of the matter are that we inherited a situation where over £750,000 of public funds had been spent on consultants and consultation around this site. We were very clearly advised by officers that the external auditors had set an imperative around the public sector best value duty, requiring us to ensure that it wasn't left in abeyance and that we actually did go through a process to ensure that we were achieving best value, A, from that expenditure by the previous administration, and B, from that site itself. We made a very open and transparent commitment that we would go through that process, that we would do what needed to be done in order to discharge the duty. We therefore went into an open market expressions of interest exercise. A number of expressions of interest were returned. They were analysed. Financial modelling was done, and we reached what I believe is a reasonable and robust conclusion that we will retain the car park as a strategic asset for the council, and in fact we will go further than that and move forward, and we're asking for permission from the Cabinet tonight to progress a design specification for resurfacing and relining works to actually improve the functionality of the car park as an asset for local residents. It would have been an interesting experience. It was an obligation we inherited, and certainly not one I would have wished to inherit. We had robust engagement with the local residents of Radlett, and particular thanks to Councillor Clapper for facilitating a packed-out public meeting and for ensuring that people were sort of kept up to date on this process through social media in particular. I think we were absolutely clear that we were going to follow the process to enable the council to discharge its statutory obligations. I did say at all stages that nobody should see that a process as one in which there was a predetermined outcome, and I think this now draws a close to a chapter that I hope will not be repeated again in the history of this council. On that note, I'm going to open comments to visiting members. Councillor Clapper.
Thank you very much, Councillor Newmark. I sit before you today as the local member for Radlett. As you'll be aware, I've been spearheading the campaign since the mention of the disposal first came up many months ago. Residents, businesses, stakeholders were rightly concerned about the loss of a really critical piece of infrastructure in Radlett. So I'd just firstly like to thank Councillor Newmark for his engagement, for not only coming along to the public meeting, which was a very robust meeting, as you so rightly say, for listening to residents, but most importantly for acting on what I believe were very valid concerns that were brought up by all stakeholders. I'm really delighted that not only are the recommendations before you that the car park is going to be retained, but that it's going to be improved, because it is desperately in need of improvement. Anyone who's been down there can see it's, very difficult to access, potholes, bit messy, could do with a bit of a facelift. So thank you very much for that. For the avoidance of doubt, I am very much in support of the recommendations before you this evening, and now Radlett can hopefully breathe a big sigh of relief. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Clapper. So Councillor Lambert next.
Right. Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to add my support to what Councillor Clapper has said, and to thank her for organising the public meeting and for your attendance and being very clear about the issues surrounding the Newbury's car park. Aldenham Parish Council, who we had a meeting on Monday, they are obviously delighted with the way things are going. They would still like to acquire the car park, given the situation with the local government review, rather than seeing it passed up to a unitary authority. We would like to see it passed down to the parish council, who are more in touch with the people who will benefit from this. And also we have an application for an asset of community value, and that is still pending, so we will see see what happens there. But I wholeheartedly support this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lambert. I'll respond to that, then I'll bring Councillor Sullivan in. In terms of Alderman Parish Council, I think we're aware of their desire to acquire the site. We have received a set of stipulations from central government that relate to the process and criteria for transfer of assets to town and parish councils as we approach local government reorganisation. The kind of key criterion amongst that list is that the rules about achieving market value and there being a sound commercial case for disposal of any assets still apply. So I think it won't come as a surprise to anyone at APC to understand that whilst we're obviously very happy to continue dialogue and conversation with them, as we're continuing dialogue and conversation with other town and parish councils around possible asset transfers, is that they are going to have to be in a position to come to the table with an offer that satisfies those very strict and firm requirements from central government in order for us to be able to consider it. So I think that's a conversation that we'll need to continue bilaterally. Look, on the asset of community value, members will be aware that it's a responsibility of the planning and infrastructure portfolio holder in consultation with the head of the planning, director of the planning department, to reach a determination on applications for assets of community value. It is the case, I understand, and I'm going to come to Councillor Oakley in a moment, that a determination was reached, and I can only apologise for the fact that it doesn't appear to have filtered through the system and been formalised or communicated. I cannot fathom why it has taken so long for that to happen, and I've made it very clear to the Chief Executive that we as a Cabinet are deeply unhappy that it has taken so long for a response to be communicated. But Councillor Oakley, if I could ask you to come in on that, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I mean, I did make a decision on the ACV some considerable time ago, what I believe to be sensible and in the best interests of residents. I may well have kind of hinted unofficially to Councillor Clapper earlier about what my decision was going to be. Unfortunately, we don't seem to have had all the paperwork, and so therefore I've not been able to formally announce it. But put it this way, I think you will probably be pleased with what my decision is.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to begin by sincerely thanking Councillors Clapper and Selby for their steadfast advocacy throughout this process. Councillor Newmark, I know the recent residents' meeting wasn't easy, but it was necessary. An incredible amount of stress and uncertainty can come from situations like this, and I believe this positive way forward will be embraced by our communities. And although already touched on, it's worth recalling that when the Conservatives previously explored options for this site, Labour were relentless in their criticism, accusing us of wasting public money on consultants. Yet here we are in the same situation, citing advice from the external auditor about their duty to achieve best value at high cost to do precisely the same thing. And now, after all of that expense and cause for unease for our residents, they have reached exactly the same conclusion we did, that the most sensible course is to retain and improve the car park rather than redevelop it. The proposal before us today to retain the car park as a strategic council asset and to progress with resurfacing and relining works is both a practical and prudent approach. The improvements planned, including lighting, electric vehicle charging points and the resurfacing itself, are essential. The current surface is not only unpleasant but dangerous. These repairs will help prevent accidents, increase usage and ultimately provide a far better experience for everyone who uses the site. Improved lighting in particular will enhance safety and security, making the car park a more welcoming and accessible space for all users. We would love to see an increase in disabled access and parking, ensuring that all Hertsmere spaces are truly for everyone. This is vital for supporting independence and making sure our community is inclusive to all residents, whatever their needs. This car park supports our local businesses and the Radlett Centre, which is well used and very much loved by residents. Retaining it ensures continuity of service without disruption and keeps an open strategic option for the future. Councillor Selby has offered her continued support for any further discussions on improvements, demonstrating a strong commitment to working collaboratively for the benefit of the community. By investing now, we ensure the site continues to serve the community well, is what they've always wanted all along, and supports local businesses for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan, whilst I wholeheartedly agree with much of what you said, I appreciate it was before your time and you may have been sort of briefed incorrectly, but the reality is that the only group in the history of this council to have ever voted to dispose of that site was the Conservative group. They left us an inheritance, they left us an issue that needed to be dealt with and closed, and we dealt with it and we closed it. I think that was the right thing to do. Members, Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. And I was just to echo those points, actually, that we actually needed to do the due diligence, and I'm glad that actually after doing that due diligence, we can retain the car park as is and look to improve it. And I hope in the near future that the residents' sigh of relief will be even more sweeter, because we look forward to putting some electrical charging points on site so that the air is not filled with diesel and petrol fumes. But it's good news all round.
Any other comments from members? Nope. Thank you very much. In which case, are members happy to agree the recommendations contained within the report? Firstly, to close the matter by approving the retention of the car park as a strategic asset, and secondly, to approve the progression of design and spec for the improvements to the site. If that's agreed, I will also ask that the minutes do reflect that I noted that we are happy to continue the ongoing conversation with Aldenham Parish Council in that respect. Okay, we'll now return to the published order of the agenda and move to agenda item 7.1, Housing Allocations Policy Approval. This is the report that actually recommends the new housing allocations policy to Council for adoption as part of our policy framework. Members will be aware that we have seen this document a number of times in various forms at Cabinet as it moved forward through the consultative process. It's now before Cabinet for the final time, and I will ask Councillor Matthews to take us through the detail and any changes since the last iteration.
Okay, thank you, Leader. If I can start by saying I'm really very pleased to be bringing the report this evening, asking Cabinet to recommend to full Council to agree the adoption of the new housing allocation policy. We're required to have an allocation policy stating how we allocate social housing. Hertsmere's policy has been in place since November 2019 with some minor revisions in 2022. But with a significant shortage of social housing, this review is aiming to achieve a more balanced response to housing need and is long overdue. This has been a long process, which a lot of members are already well familiar with. I won't go into a lot of detail. It was initially reported as part of our major departmental priorities to policy review meeting in March. Cabinet approved the consultation, which kicked off with the public and with key partners. The process revealed a very strong level of support, and the results from that were fed back to Policy Review Committee in July. Policy Review has also set up a task and finish group on housing availability to consider how we encourage the release of family-sized homes from people who are under-occupying existing social homes. This has met twice and is due to report back shortly. I won't go through the detail of the report, but just to say that the priorities are about how we deal with social housing transfers, to make sure we give appropriate priority to the people who are suffering the worst forms of overcrowding, and to make sure that we give priority which actually encourages people to vacate larger homes which they no longer need. There's things we can do to help prevent homelessness. We think we could be slightly more generous in people who need to move to the borough for support, because we have a good availability of suitable accommodation in those categories. It includes a review of the financial criteria to make sure we're targeting social housing at the people who have no other choice. And we're reviewing age-restricted criteria which need to reflect the constraints imposed on us by the housing associations in terms of older people's accommodation. But also we'll be making sure that priority is given to local people to move into adapted and extra care housing. We've had to add to the proposals, take into account the more recent government changes which took effect in July, so an exemption for care leavers under the age of 25 and victims of domestic abuse who subsequently had to leave their home because of that abuse. I'd particularly like to thank Emily, Dylan and her team, and again particularly Maggie Benson, who's done a lot of the work. And what I would say is that this 90-page report doesn't reflect the amount of effort which has been involved in working up these proposals and going through the consultation. So I really commend you for the amount of work which has gone into this. And so finally, I would ask Cabinet to recommend to full Council the adoption of the new housing allocation policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to begin by thanking Councillor Matthews and our officers for their hard work in producing this updated policy. It's clear that a great deal of effort, collaboration and thought has gone into this document. Before turning to the main policy points, I also want to thank Councillor Matthews for his work with Peabody. His persistence in ensuring that Peabody takes responsibility for their properties and to keep our families in safe, well-managed social housing is greatly appreciated. Every home properly maintained and retained within Hertsmere is a vital step in protecting and supporting our community. Turning to the amendments themselves, tackling overcrowding and releasing family homes remains one of our biggest priorities. I want to highlight there is further future work being undertaken which will support this document via the Policy Task and Finish group. It was identified during policy debate by Councillor Sussman to Councillor Matthews as a key way to expand the number of family homes where the shortage was most acute. We need to push this forward urgently by incentivising and assisting residents to downsize where appropriate. We can help free up larger homes for families who need them most. Enabling our residents to be in the right size and type of home for their needs is the most efficient way to manage our already strained housing stock. It makes best use of every property and ensures fairness across the system. The amendments before us strengthen our focus on preventing homelessness and supporting moves within family networks, allowing people to live closer to relatives, reducing isolation and promoting independence and well-being. Finally, as the Renters Reform Bill progresses, we are likely to see a greater demand and less supply, with many landlords leaving the private rental market. This makes it even more urgent to implement this report and to conclude the Task and Finish group swiftly, so that we are ready to respond to the pressures ahead. Overall, this policy reflects a fair, practical and compassionate approach, one that uses our limited housing resources wisely while keeping residents' real needs at its heart. Thank you.
Any other comments from visiting members? Councillor Matthews, do you want to respond? Councillor Sullivan?
Well, thank you for your comments, Councillor Sullivan. And with respect of Peabody, we are certainly moving in the right direction and hope to make an announcement shortly.
Just to underscore and to thank Councillor Matthews and Emily Dillon for the massive amount of work that has gone into really actually achieving a shift in Peabody's position that looked unachievable at the outset. I joined them on the day of the train strike, the tube strike in central London, for an incredibly helpful and productive meeting with the Chief Executive and Regional Managing Director of Peabody, and as Councillor Matthews says, a formal announcement on the sort of final outcome of those talks is coming shortly, and we of course did achieve a suspension of the sales in the meantime. I'm also pleased that Councillor Sullivan mentioned the Renters Reform Bill. It's true that it will impact in a number of different ways, but perhaps the most significant thing for many private tenants in Hertsmere and beyond is that it will finally deliver the end of no-fault evictions, which was a central premise of the government's manifesto upon taking office, and something that we also promised locally to lobby and press for as part of our own manifesto, and it's particularly pleasing to see that now being delivered. Are there any further comments from members on this? Councillor Gray.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's a very well-written report, and it has my full support. I'd also just like to thank Councillor Matthews and the team for highlighting and shining a light on the issue of children of different sexes sharing a single bedroom, especially when one's over the age of 13, and the priority that's been given is very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, I will ask members to approve the recommendation that we now take the housing allocations policy contained within Appendix 1 of the report to Council for adoption as part of our policy framework. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. We will now move forward to agenda item 7.2, the allocation of community infrastructure levy funding for the Elstree Film Studios immersive experience. I will ask Councillor Oakley to say a few words on the element of this that relates directly to the deliberations of the SILIP panel and the SIL portfolio, but I just wanted to say a few introductory words about what I think is one of the most exciting capital projects that has been proposed for this borough, potentially for a generation. This sort of dates back to the various calls and the cross-party motion proposed by myself and Councillor Clapper, I think nearly 4 years ago now, with the support of Councillor Bright, very much at the instigation of the late Paul Welsh, to establish a film and TV heritage centre in the borough to underscore our ability to leverage growth as a tourist destination on the back of our film and TV heritage. That idea was allowed to percolate over time, and it really has transitioned way beyond the notion of a traditional old school style museum, which tends to be expensive, difficult to maintain and sustain, and has sort of limited capacity in terms of numbers it can draw, to something that will leverage the very latest in AI, VR and AR, I think I've got all those initials right, technology, to the point at which, rather than sort of having to walk down corridors of display cabinets, visitors will actually be able to hold direct interactive conversations with the likes of George Lucas and Steven Spielberg about their experiences of filming in the area. It's an incredibly exciting project. It will be one of the legacies of the Elstree Film Studios' 100th anniversary, but it very much has the collaboration not just of EFS, but of Sky Universal, Comcast, and the new Fairbank Studio Centre and the BBC itself. It's a collaborative effort, and I believe a very worthwhile recipient of SIL funds. The decision that Cabinet is being asked to make today isn't a final approval. As with all major capital projects of this nature. Some of the detail is still a work in progress, but it's a work in very advanced progress. The nature of partnership projects like this is that they reach a point at which the major capital funding needs to be confirmed in principle to allow other funders and other partners to come on board, and we're fast approaching that point, which is why we are now asking Cabinet to approve this bid going forward to Council in about a month's time, by which point some of the finer details around the governance and some of the financial sensitivity analysis will be worked out or finalised. I think it's worth stressing that the bid is not contingent on absolute I's being dotted and T's being crossed on governance, but obviously payment of any funds will be absolutely contingent on those matters being finalised. Councillor Oakley, shall I bring you in at this stage to talk us through the sort of SILIP aspect of this
Thank you,
proposal?
Leader. I'm not sure you've left me much to say, but never mind. I think anyone who's heard me talk about SIL applications before will know that I selected the panel for a variety of talents, from looking at kind of community projects to people with project management experience to people with very serious financial experience, so that I know that anything that comes to the SIL investment panel will be scrutinised very, very well. And certainly at the panel where we considered this, the members were very true to form in their scrutiny examination, and also the questions they had to ask over the application. I mean, I think this is an incredibly exciting project, and as the leader has said, it goes well beyond the kind of original aspirations of members here, in that we have a heritage centre. I think this is a truly 21st century heritage centre, in inverted commas, where the mere fact that it's immersive and can move and change and engage people is very important. I think it's also particularly relevant in terms of education, economic development, and certainly the numbers that we were presented with are really quite impressive in terms of visitor numbers, schools that we can engage, job opportunities, both direct employment and kind of off-site employment as well. So I think this is something definitely worth funding. £2 million is quite a lot of money. We recognise that, but we also felt that it was actually kind of a good investment. But of course, this is the start of the process. This SIL funding will help actually open up the doors to additional investment. And of course, we do have the support, obviously, of our own film studios. We have the support of Sky and Concourse. And we have a ready-made venue, which always helps. So I'm asking Cabinet to support this, so that we can actually take this forward to the next council meeting, because it actually fulfills quite a lot of our cultural strategy, our creative strategy, and I think this can only be a very good thing for Hertsmere. And, as has already been said by the leader, it's a real legacy project.
Thank you. Councillor Shenton, did you want to say anything at this point on the finances, and particularly the sort of replenishment aspect?
Very briefly, I am very enthusiastic about this. I was on the SILIP panel and I've had another briefing about it. However, I come at this as the financial cynic and wanting to see the numbers and wanting to be convinced that it's a viable product. And I do. I think it is. The payback period is really quite short on the predicted numbers, and the opportunity for additional growth is excellent. This isn't a leading edge this isn't a bleeding edge project. There are others that exist like this. It is using other people's experience, just bettering them. So I think from a financial point of view, there is information to be provided yet. There is more to know, but I am persuaded that this is a very viable project. Thank you.
Thank you. Visiting members, Councillor Bright.
Thank you very much indeed, Leader. And if I can, obviously at this stage, because I am speaking on this item, if I can declare also another pecuniary interest as a council-appointed director of the studios with the same dispensation to be able to speak, as you mentioned earlier on in the evening. Obviously, I don't vote on this item because I'm not a member of the Cabinet. It's an amazing time to be bringing something like this forward. Because of the way technology has evolved, but specifically over the last 5 years, as you say, since we were starting talking about it. One of the things I always wanted, as well as new stages, I always said we must get some kind of visitor centre, not just because Paul Welsh and Bob Redman are knocking on our doors, but because it just seems so odd that we had no way to celebrate our history and our heritage. You know, we were moving forwards, setting the scene for the future, but we had no way of doing it. But as you say, it's all very well having cabinets full of sort of things that people can go and have a look at and take pictures of with the glass reflecting as it does on these occasions. But to be able to go into an immersive experience, and I went into one last year with my youngest son. We went to Barcelona and we went to visit where the new stadium was being built. And while it's being built, they had an immersive experience around the stadium. And it's just the most amazing thing. You can pick up the trophies and all sorts of stuff. And it gets the young really involved. Now, move that over to film, and suddenly you can be there with Indiana Jones and, you know, being chased down to the Temple of Doom and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's, as well as being hugely educational and hugely attractive to people to want to get involved in the industry, and hugely attractive for people to come to the area as a consequence. So I do believe that the numbers will add up. And it's not just because I love the idea, because I think business plans are important, but because I do think we are at the cutting edge. And this shows, especially now with Fairbanks Studios being where BBC Elstree was, it shows we don't stand still. It shows with Sky, with us, with what was BBC, we're continuing to move forward and embrace new technology. Be wrong not to question, throw a few questions in at this stage. I do want to see where we are with governance. I think governance is hugely important. I want to make sure that if we're spending this kind of money, that this authority retains the governance. We don't want to be in a situation where we hand it over to another body, which we sit on, and then find that we have no say or no powers further on down the line, particularly if we get to a stage where we feel we want to sell it on, because it could be doing so well that the industry may want to take it on, and we may need or want a receipt at that stage later on. And so I'd be very interested in seeing where we are with that. I know governance was talked about 6 weeks ago at the panel, and we're 6-7 weeks further down the line. I would like to think that with the correct governance in place, reassurance about the correct governance and the legal advice as well, that I'd like to think that our group would be very supportive of such an idea. And I think we have to be realistic about timetables. I think finally, my final point is that whilst it would be great to get it done by the end of December 2026, we are now only talking 14, 15, 16 months. And one of the things that I said to Councillor Newmark earlier on, the great thing about Elstree Studios and having a 100th anniversary is we could spread it out over 3 years. 2025, it was 100 years since the site was bought. 2026 is 100 years since they first started building stages, and 2027 is when they started creating films. So if it goes into 2027, it's not the end of the world, but I'm wholly supportive. I hope our group will be as well. Let's keep an eye on governance. Let's look after this, because it's something that we're all going to be very, very proud of, and it'd be great to make sure that we hold on to it and look after it for the future times. Thank you.
Any other comments from visiting members? Yeah, just to respond briefly, and thank you, Councillor Bright, for your solid support of this project and for your sort of other work on the EFS Centenary Board in particular. I think that governance is complex for a project of this nature. It has a direct relationship to tax efficiencies as well, and it's one of those catch-22 situations where the coherence of the governance will partly be a function of the extent to which we require private funding to top up the public funding. So by bringing this report forward to Council and confirming the level of public funding, we will be resolving one of the questions that will in turn help us to achieve, I think, the governance structure that we as elected members all see as optimal. What I have committed, because issues around governance, financial sensitivities and so on are both complex and in some cases commercially sensitive, in any case the scope of this project and the amount of funds probably sits beyond just a standard council debate around a decision report in which we have 5 speakers, is that in advance of this coming to full council, we have committed to arrange a Part 2 member workshop to which all members will be invited to attend. Key partners to the project will be present, including the University of Hertfordshire, who are playing a central role in delivering this. So everybody will have the opportunity to ask the questions that they feel they need to ask and probe this in more detail. Members, Councillor Giorgio.
Thank you, Councillor Newmark. Yes, so I agree in terms of this application on this project being something which is probably unique to our borough and the area that we're in terms of the studios that we have in the area that have been mentioned, in terms of some of the things like the HBC Academy and some of the local groups, the music and drama groups in the local area, and the wider ecosystem of all of the companies that help our film and TV studios to produce excellent sets and to produce excellent costumes and all other things in the area. I did want to also mention that there is a possibility that one day we could become part of a unitary authority with Watford, and if that were to happen as well, we're in we could be in an area where we own this excellent project at the same time as some of the things that they have in their area, with things like Warner Brothers and other studios there as well. And so there's definitely some synergy there that could happen in the future. I'd also mention that there was some discussion around kind of like, you know, potentially if we were to ever sell this in the future. I think, you know, we're taking a little bit of a risk here in doing something a little bit out there with this, and I think that by doing this, the residents of the future could both benefit from having this in the area, but also could benefit from some of the profits that might be made from doing this. And I would like to see those profits retained for the benefit of our residents in the future. And finally, also, I think just there's also some of the other things that maybe haven't been mentioned as well. I've seen some discussion around things like kind of Comic-Con events and things like that could take place in places like this. And, you know, people love to come and dress up as their favourite characters and make a big event out of these kinds of things. They often do with film screenings as well and things like that. And so it could also be a much bigger social event for our town, and also all the great benefits it will bring to our high streets and people in the local area in that way as well. So I'm very happy with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I fully support the recommendations set out in front of us tonight. I have no doubt with my economic development hat on that this will become a fantastic visitor experience, one that we'll have multiple returns to, because it's quite easy to change the content in this kind of virtual world that will be created. But one thing I do want to stress, and I think is really important here, is let's not forget the educational value that this will bring to the borough. You know, we will be able to speak to schools about their English literature curriculum for that year. We will be able to design Macbeth or Romeo and Juliet. The students can go into that world and talk to the characters. It'll bring that syllabus to life, and I don't want that to be forgotten, because I think that's going to be a massive part of this experience as well, the wealth of educational opportunities that it'll bring to our residents, both old and young.
Thank you. Any other comments from members? No, I'll just correct Councillor Giorgio on one thing, because our neighbours at Three Rivers will not thank me if I don't point out that the other studio asset that he was referring to, although it's often claimed by Watford, is actually in Three Rivers.
I'd just say both of those might be in one of the models we've seen, so forgive me for that, thank you.
Indeed, but we'll focus on the dressing up as film characters instead. And Councillor Gray, of course, you're right. The sort of educational, social and community aspects of this are equally important, and the benefits to local schools will be absolutely immense, and it will give them a qualitative edge against schools in areas without this kind of resource. So on that basis, are members happy to take this report forward to full council for recommendation of approval of the £2 million SIL grant as previously recommended by the SILIP panel back at the end of August? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We'll now move to agenda item 7.3, the service road in Manaway, Boreham Wood. This item actually covers three different portfolios. Myself as asset management, Councillor Myers as street scene, and Councillor Richards as environmental sustainability and public health. I think, by way of introduction, what I really want to say actually is that anybody ever says the only way you can make a difference on a campaigning issue in this council is by having a portfolio on the cabinet, then this piece of work by Councillor Prabhakar Kaza is absolutely proof that that is not the case. This issue has been going on for as long as anybody can remember. There have been consultants, reports, recommendations, and nobody has been able to nail it. But my absolute tenacity and persistence, as I'm sure Ian Kershaw will testify to, Councillor Kaza has really, as I say, nailed this one. The land was owned privately by the traders operating on the shop fronts. It had become an absolutely sort of horrendous cesspit of fly tipping, environmental health hazards, rats, I don't know what else. We were sort of doing one-off clearances at cost to the public purse, even though we had no responsibility to do so. The land was effectively allowed to lapse and became property of the Crown. We have decided, on the recommendation of Councillor Kaza, to act to acquire the land on behalf of the council, which will finally give us the level of control we need to prevent the antisocial uses that have blighted that service road over the years. Together with a number of fellow members, I was sort of out and about by the shopping parade in Manaway just over a fortnight ago now, talking to local residents and shop owners, and it was still the first thing that everybody raised with us. I'm really pleased we've been able to find a solution. I'm really pleased that this is a great piece of casework from an elected member, and I'll pass to Councillor Myers to go into some more detail.
Thank you very much. You were passing to Councillor Richards first because he had... It doesn't matter.
Councillor Richards.
No, it's fine. It's not a problem. I'm here now. I have the mic. But just to pick up a couple of things that you said, mostly about Councillor Kaza and the incredible amount of work that he has done. And I still think that we should rename this Kaza's Passage, but nobody will have it. But it's been a very, very, very long-running issue for Boreham Wood residents, Kenilworth residents, and well done, Councillor Kaza, for all the work that you've done on this. And it is worth noting that this was the only slip road in the borough that was either not private or not already in the hands of Hertsmere. So whilst people may be looking elsewhere at other slip roads, why don't we do this here? This was the only one that we could actually do. So this had dropped back to Crown Estate, so we're taking this over. So it's just to keep that on record. There is only this one that we could do this with. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Richards.
If there's much else left to say, I mean, the decision report before us addresses the persistent and highly visible public nuisance in Boreham Wood that demands decisive action. Just to reiterate, this is the only service road in this situation. So it is an absolutely unique set of circumstances in terms of there being no active private or public local owner. And the current status, therefore, prevents us from compelling proper management and maintenance. So the report recommends to Cabinet that Cabinet agree to the acquisition of this service road by the council. Bringing this land into council ownership would grant us the necessary powers to actively control and manage the area. We can enforce the removal of abandoned vehicles, mandate purpose-built bin stores, and install physical barriers to prevent vehicle-borne fly tipping. To achieve this, we're recommending the allocation of £150,000 from the contingency. The sum covers the up to 30,000 in terms of legal costs, possible legal costs, and then 120,000 on the essential works needed to upgrade the road surface, allowing for mechanical cleansing and a long-term reduction in cleansing costs. So it's a key decision that aligns directly with our corporate plans, aims of protecting the environment and supporting vibrant town centres. By taking ownership, we transition from reactive clean-ups to proactive management, significantly improving the public realm for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Richards. Members, I'm going to come to Councillor Carser first.
Thank you very much. I thank all the borough officers and councillors for this opportunity to speak on this topic. The Manaway Shopping Arcade building was constructed in 2001 with the one side road and the back road on private ownership. In the year 2011, Manaway Accommodation Road Company took over the ownership of the roads. There are shops below and the flats on top. The building served a very good purpose and became the major shopping center in Borehamwood South. However, the building ran into civic issues. The garbage of the residents, which was collected directly on the doorstep of the flats, very conveniently, up to the year 2011, was due to change in the system of garbage collection by the borough. The residents were expected to leave the bags on the pavement on either side of the building on the day of collection. The arrangement was a messy affair, and the overflowing rubbish turned the road at the entrance of the building into insanitary and unhygienic place. In some cases, the children and even the parents had to jump over garbage bags to get out of the building. After visits by borough officers and councillors, of course, and the landowners in 2021-22, the building was provided with adequate bins placed on the pavement, which mitigated the situation. Be that as it may, the backside road continued to be used for fly tipping by residents around the building and even outsiders, and was majorly used for permanently placed commercial skips, which are still there, storing building material as well as parking commercial vans. And also some, reported that to the borough, some sown vehicles, untaxed, unemorted ones. The road also has an unlicensed car garage, which also parks vehicles on the road brought there for repair. The garbage on the road was an environmental hazard and attracted insects, rodents, which the chief had been able to mention this, and was a subject of hostile criticism by members of the public in the social media. After much persuasion, the landlords have dissolved the company on 26th of December 2023 and surrendered the road to the Crown. After personal correspondence with, I hope the word is correct, Bona Vacantia Division of the Crown Estate Department, they were pleased to issue a Bona Vacantia disclaimer on 23rd September 2025. Happy to note personally, and I'm sure it will be welcomed wholeheartedly by one and all in Manaway, Kenilworth, Borehamwood, if the road is taken over by Hertsmere Borough and brought to accessible standards of modern living under, of course, Labour administration, and setting right a historic wrong. I thank all the councillors, borough officers, and in particular the residents who took up this cause, because it was just lying around for 25 years, for their valuable support. So thank you very much, Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garza. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, congratulations, Councillor Garza, for your tenacity and for getting to this point and standing up for your residents. It really is commendable. And it is in many ways unfortunate that we've had to reach this point where the council had to formally acquire the service road at Manor Road. Ideally, this would have been a well-managed, respected space, used responsibly and safely by the community. However, the reality was very different. For too long, this stretch of land had been persistently blighted by fly tipping, antisocial behaviour, abandoned vehicles and public nuisance. It has caused distress for residents and businesses alike, undermining the quality of life in the surrounding area. This is why this acquisition, free regrettable in circumstance, is a necessary and positive step. The council must take decisive action to restore order, safety and pride in our local environment. By bringing this service road under council ownership, we can finally establish clear responsibility and control, ensuring that proper measures are in place to manage, maintain and protect the area. The goal is straightforward: to create a healthier, cleaner and safer environment for everyone who lives and works nearby. This action signals that we are no longer willing to tolerate neglect, nuisance or the small minority who spoil our spaces for everyone else. However, I must also raise an important question. What happens if we take charge of this road and it doesn't prevent these problems? We need to be very clear about the mitigations and consequences that will follow if antisocial behaviour continues. If individuals persist in fly tipping or dumping cars, there must be robust enforcement, fixed penalties, legal action where appropriate, and visible deterrence to show that this behaviour will not be ignored. We owe that assurance to our community, and people must understand you do not do this in our borough. So while it's a shame it's had to come to this, it's also a moment of progress. Hertsmere is acting. This acquisition represents not just ownership of a piece of land, but ownership of a problem. Thank you.
Councillor Bright.
Thank you very much indeed. I think I probably just about live nearest to this stretch of road than any other councillor. Use that parade of shops regularly, several times a week. And it has indeed been blighted and continues to be blighted. And I'm very grateful to Councillor Garza for the work that's been done. I wholeheartedly endorse what Councillor Sullivan just said. We take over a road doesn't mean people are going to suddenly stop doing what they're doing. We've now got to make sure they stop doing what they're doing, and that with that comes complications. CCTV peripatetic like we've had, we're going to have to chase, we're going to have to get our environmental health people to look through bags of rubbish, and don't imagine just because there are blue bins on the side that they still don't dump stuff next to it like furniture and so on as people change bits of stuff upstairs in their flats. So we're going to have to stay on the case. I think it's very important that we make it quite clear to those people who don't live in this particular part of Bournemouth, but the people who live, for example, near the back roads that connect Cardinal and Whitehouse Avenue on one side, the shops in Shenley Road, and Clarendon Road and Grosvenor, which is known as Rat Alley, and it is Rat Alley. I go up there a couple of times now, and I went up there a few days ago, and one rushed out in front of me. Why it is we're able to purchase a piece of land and hopefully stop it here. We have to be able to show that we can enforce whether we own a piece of land or not, because it is wholly unacceptable this type of behaviour, and all that will happen is you'll get more people, not more people, you could end up having more displacement from people who use the area, this one here. So it is very important, because otherwise it looks like you're almost rewarding a company. We'll walk away from it, we're going to buy it from the Crown, we're going to take over that responsibility. So you've got to have a clear message that goes across the borough on this. On this particular one, though, I do think it's progress, and I'm very pleased that it is. I didn't do Latin at school, but I thought Bono vacantia meant you'd had a good holiday, but apparently it doesn't. It means the land is free for other people to take over, and I'm glad we have done. But yes, let's enforce it. There's no point being a toothless bear, but let's also get the message down to other behind other shops, not just in Bournemouth, but other areas that are suffering like this, that this isn't a reward. We're taking it over and letting other companies get away with it. We have to use the enforcement. I know Ian Kershaw, I know Environmental Health do their very, very best, but in some parts it really just still isn't quite good enough. And again, I'm sure that if you've walked down there, you'll see it yourself. So very well done indeed, Councillor Garza. And thank you very much, hopefully, to the Cabinet for agreeing these recommendations. Very, very worthwhile.
Thank you. Just to be absolutely clear, I know it's not what Councillor Bright was suggesting, but there's no question of rewarding a company. We'll be purchasing this directly from the Crown. The company effectively sort of forfeited the land, and actually I think that company no longer exists. So yeah, there's no question of a reward. And his points about the need to ensure that we actually do implement and enforce, I know will be well taken, and I know that Councillor Kaza will be on the case. But of course, with the benefit of ownership comes the ability to place physical measures in place to restrict access and so on, which I think we've concluded is what this site really needs. We're acutely aware of the issues with sort of so-called Rat Alley and the other service roads, and it's worth noting that we did explore the recommendations made by the consultants that his administration commission to look at our town centres in terms of what could be done with those service roads, and it turned out that it just wasn't viable to wasn't financially viable to implement the recommendations in that report. But we do continue to make occasional clearances when the situation does reach a crisis point, and I know that we continue to strive to look for innovative and creative long-term solutions to those particular problems in partnership with the shop and restaurant owners. And actually a conversation with one of them earlier today who did say that he felt the situation had improved along the Clarendon Road stretch in particular. So we continue to work on that, but this is an important part of the solution. Councillor Oakley.
Thank you, Leader. This is my ward, and I can honestly say that in all the years that I was a councillor elsewhere, as well as here, I'd never seen anything quite like what the residents had to experience in this area. With no exaggeration, we had more complaints about this particular aspect of the ward than anything else. And a lot of them didn't understand the lengthy process that's actually taken to actually deal with this. And I would like to thank my ward colleague for all the work he's actually done on this. I mean, day and night he has been down there sorting things out, only to discover that by the following morning rubbish that had been removed had reappeared. It's quite indescribable. So thank you, Councillor Kaza. Thank you also, Ian Kershaw, Assistant Director Street Scene, for all of the work that's been done on that. I think if I had some sort of device with me to play some music, it would be the Beatles' Long and Winding Road, because that's what this has been. I'd like to think this is the beginning of the end. But I think there's a lot of work to be done. A lot of it has got to be done to remind people that dumping stuff all around here is unacceptable behaviour, and that actions have consequences. I'm not sure that Councillor Kaza's work is done here. I think he's going to be spending quite a lot of time there, but I do thank him for everything that he has done, and I hope the residents understand just how long these things take, and they don't happen overnight. And we can now hopefully give them a good news story.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. And just 2 points on this. Congratulations, Prabhakar. It's an amazing piece of work. I hope going forward we'll have a bit more bandwidth to discuss something other than this particular road, because every time we chat, that's all we end up talking about, but you'll never get me to understand cricket. The second point is, obviously, the budget that we set aside for this, a very small amount of that is actually being used for the purchase or the acquiring of that road. The bulk of it is to bring it up to spec, and I'm sure that target hardening will be part of that process of returning it back to a reasonable state. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, are members of the Cabinet happy to agree to the recommendation in the report, which is the acquisition of the service road, the boundaries of which are delineated in the plan at Appendix 1, and the allocation of £150,000 from our contingency budget to cover the costs of the acquisition, legal costs, and, as Councillor Gray said, the bulk of the funds will be used for making up the road to an improved standard. Is that agreed? Thank you, members. We'll now move on to agenda item 7.4, the disposal of council-owned assets, Theobald Street, Boreham Wood. Again, this falls under my portfolio and Councillor Shenton's, so this will be somewhat of a double act. We're sort of asking council really to sort of help us to close what has been a sort of long extended saga on this building, which actually started when I think Councillor Jean Hayward was the sort of portfolio holder, and what was the sort of former Stonham Housing Association, who had operated the property as a probation sort of hostel type setup, that have closed it at I think virtually no notice and effectively left it to become into disrepair, and it eventually became derelict. It was a huge eyesore and a key part of the town, and a huge waste of a publicly owned asset at the end of the day. I think we worked on a cross-party basis to work to recover the master lease on the site. This spanned a number of different property portfolio holders, from Councillor Hayward to Councillor John Graham to Councillor Clapper and myself. It took us certainly the best part of I think 15-16 months from coming into office to actually be able to finally acquire that lease. I think it was effectively the successor body to Stonham were able to obtain tax benefits from leaving it in the state that it was, but they eventually accepted our public interest arguments. We did look at developing the site ourselves or in partnership with HDL, but we concluded that the best way to get the site back into use and to enable some delivery of affordable and social housing would be to go out to the market. We were particularly keen to ensure, given the history of the site and its location, that there was a significant element of community value. We included, I think, a 20% weighting on that in the tender, which is relatively high. And this wasn't a case of simply looking for the maximal financial contribution. We are moving forward recommending a bid that I think very nicely blends the need for social housing, community use and financial value. Obviously there are commercial sensitivities here, and there is an adjacent Part 2 report in which we will be able to go into more detail about the successful bidder, but I think suffice to say that this is going to be an innovative and creative scheme that, as well as providing in the region of 20 housing units with affordable provision, it will also become home to I want to be very careful how I phrase this so as not to breach our Part 2 stipulations, a very important volunteer emergency medical service provider who have long been looking for a permanent home for their vehicles and their operation, who are providing an immensely important addition to NHS ambulance provision in the area. On that note, I'll pass to Councillor Shenton.
Thank you, Leader. I'll reserve most of my comments to part two. Just one little point. You'll notice in the efficiency gains, it says it's costing us £3,400 a month not to do anything with it. So the sooner the better that we can sell it on and use this very useful site as housing, the better. Thanks.
Visiting members, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. No one disputes that 39 Theobald Street is in an unacceptable state of disrepair. We all agree that this site needs urgent redevelopment, and our group would absolutely support that. But once again, which is the recurring theme, with the council choosing to dispose of an asset rather than develop it itself, or be strong with what we demand to a joint partner. This is exactly the sort of site HDL was set up for. A centrally located piece of council-owned land, a short walk away from Shenley Road shops, restaurants, and the train and bus hubs of Boreham Wood. This is a perfect location for truly affordable or even social rental homes. A site where people could live without relying on cars, reducing pressure on parking, and supporting sustainable local living. We keep hearing the language of social value from this administration, about embedding fairness, building communities, and tackling inequality. Chair, all of us support these principles, but tonight's decision doesn't live up to them. Selling a prime council-owned site when it could deliver generally affordable housing and real community space is not social value. We could offer this community space to a community group or charity within a development while still retaining control of the tenure and housing within the site, and this could still benefit the organisation named in Part 2. And I must say, we are surprised, disappointed and perplexed to see office space proposed here, directly next door to other offices already standing vacant. Why are we introducing more empty commercial units into a saturated market when the urgent need is for homes people can actually live in? Furthermore, this is offered on an unconditional sale. Does that mean we don't have a final steer of the planning permissions sought? And what is our guarantee about the affordable housing promised in the report? Can we have a guarantee on the level of affordable housing that will be on the site? This site could have been something really special, a small mixed tenure development with local lettings priorities, shared courtyards and community meeting space, true social value. And on that point, I would like to ask directly, was every bidder asked to include homes and community space into their proposals? Was it an equal playing field, or were they asked just for development of housing? Because if we're asking for social value, if everyone was asked to tender for community space and housing, it may look very different. Chair, if this Cabinet really believed this was the right decision for Hertsmere, this would be taken to full council for full debate, open to public scrutiny and democratic accountability. And as much as you like to nod in disagreement, these are very pertinent questions that residents have. Any sale of residents' land should be open to full scrutiny at full council. This would enhance resident buy-in and understanding. Yes, redevelopment must happen, but it should be council-led and planned, ensuring homes at genuinely affordable or social rents with real community benefits, because that's what residents deserve. Thank you.
Councillor Brisky.
You know, I recall sitting in the full council meeting, which was actually the last of my first term, in which this council resolved to acquire this asset along lease in order to recover possession of the asset. However, my recollection is that we believed that this site offered an exciting brownfield development opportunity for the council to develop itself. Indeed, the security fencing installed clearly suggests that this authority would be delivering housing on the site. So my question is, what changed? And forgive me if some of what I'm about to say is perhaps answered in the Part 2 report, which I obviously don't have visibility of, but from what I can tell, by reading the report, we don't know exactly how many homes will be built, we don't know what the housing split and tenures will be, and we don't know how the affordable houses will be allocated. But that would be very different had we been able to develop this ourselves. Therefore, we choose to dispose of this site. I will probably have to leave for the PTM before we get to the Director's Arms item, but the same applies to that, because on that site we won't get any affordable housing at all delivered. And I imagine that the reason that will be given for both of these items, for why we won't be developing them ourselves, is that the cost of borrowing is too high. But my question is, what happened to all the Section 106 money we had in the bank to deliver off-site affordable housing? Are we selling off public assets and losing our ability to determine affordable housing splits and allocations ourselves because all our money has vanished? And therefore, I would like to support Councillor Sullivan's call for this to be determined by full council, because it was in fact full council that decided to acquire the lease and take back possession of the asset. Thank you.
Friends, look, I think we've just heard the argument for delaying progress with additional bureaucracy. They're the blockers. They want to hide behind the bureaucracy. We're the builders. We've both approved and delivered more affordable housing in the past 2.5 years than their various administrations did over a decade. The numbers speak for themselves. The problem with coming to cabinet meetings with pre-prepared speeches and not having read the papers properly is that you risk ending up looking rather silly. It's absolutely clear from the report that there will be a minimum of 16 units on the scheme, possibly 20, including policy compliance, affordable housing provision aimed at those experiencing disadvantage in the housing market, younger households, lower income families, and people with disabilities. In terms of HDL, I don't disagree with Councillor Sullivan that this might have been an ideal site for them to develop. But the kind of clue was in the title. This went to an open market exercise. HDL had every right to submit a bid as part of that open market exercise if they felt they could deliver a suitable project on the site. They failed to do so. Again, we can delay, we can block, we can introduce more bureaucracy, or we can get on with the business of delivering social value and delivering affordable homes, which is exactly what we're doing here. I don't see any case whatsoever for suggesting that because we're discussing this at Cabinet, it lacks full public scrutiny. The papers have been published. This is an open meeting. People have had every right to come along and have their say. You've come along and had your say. We're confident in the fact that we are delivering what will be a showpiece project for this part in Boreham Wood, and the social value will simply exceed almost anything that has been delivered on any council-owned asset in the centre of town for many years, when you actually see what the charity concerned is going to be doing with the site. I think, again, there's a misunderstanding or a misreading of office space. The office space will be to house the operations of the charity concerned. This isn't commercial office space available for rent on the general market. I'm very confident that this is the right plan for this site. I'm very confident that by going to the open market, by finding an appropriate partner, we are delivering this in the shortest time available, minimising the expenditure on securing the site. And I will be the first to say that in many cases, it is indeed the scenario that private developers are able to bring projects to fruition in a more efficient, effective and speedier manner than we are able to as a local authority. And whilst it might look better and tick boxes to do the work ourselves, it doesn't deliver the homes that people need. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair, and yes, endorse everything you say, and I'll be fully supporting this recommendation. I'm certainly not going to take any lectures from Councillor Brisky in terms of delivering affordable homes, considering he just turned down an application on Shenley Hill for just under 200 affordable homes in an area of this borough that's only delivered 9 in over a decade. This is the right sort of thing to do, and I give it my full support.
Thank you. I'll also, sorry, Councillor Brisky, I didn't respond to your comment on the director's arms, but I think, again, I'm not sure if you've sort of read the report, but there is an absolute commitment to the delivery of affordable and social housing on that site. So I'm a little bit puzzled, and sort of perhaps you'd like to get in touch after the meeting to clarify why you think that that is not the case. I'm going to move forward because I know Councillor Brisky is keen to be with us for the Director's Arms item. So I'm going to ask members if they are happy to agree the recommendations, firstly to approve the unconditional sale of the property as identified in plans on Appendix A on the terms outlined in the Part 2 section of the report. Secondly, to authorise the Head of Asset Management and our Chief Finance Officer in consultation with myself as Asset Management Portfolio Holder to agree the detailed sale terms. And thirdly, to authorise Council's Legal Services team to move forward with preparing and completing the documentation to give effect to the sale, including the detailed terms of the overage agreement, which I think actually answers another of the questions that Councillor Sullivan mentioned earlier, and the associated legal documentation. Is that agreed, members? Thank you. So we'll now move forward to another asset management focused report, the disposal of the former Director's Arms site in Boreham Wood. And this report is absolutely clear and explicit about what will be happening on that site. There was a bid that was put forward by HDL to develop that site and the almost adjacent Paxton Court site. Unfortunately, we were not able to move forward with that bid, both because of issues around deliverability, but also more significantly because of a series of flaws in its ability to meet our best value duty in comparison to an offer that was received on the open market. One of the advantages of the offer being received on the open market is that it is just for the Director's Arms portion of the site, whereas the HDL proposals also encompassed the nearly adjacent Paxton Court site. This particular bid will enable us to utilise the Paxton Court site to move forward with our plans to bring an NHS community diagnostic centre to Boreham Wood, meeting the long-established need and campaigning imperative for medical provision in South Boreham Wood following the historic closure of the Manaway surgery. I think this is a really important step forward in terms of the future of that site that had lain bare and empty under the previous administration. Once again, we're delivering homes, we're delivering affordable homes, we're delivering social homes, and we're opening the door to the delivery of new medical provision in South Boreham Wood. I believe this to be a win-win-win scenario, and it's hard to understand why anybody would oppose the set of plans that will bring much needed housing to the area, that will bring new social and affordable homes to Boreham Wood as a whole, and that will finally open the door to enable us to deliver on the commitment that successive administrations have made, that our MP has made over a 12-year period, and that we have been making for the past 2 years to deliver medical provision in that part of Boreham Wood. I'm going to ask Councillor Shenton to come in at that point.
Thank you, Leader. So, given that it appears to be politically contentious, I will say a little bit more about this site. It was going to be developed by HDL, as various people have said, as potentially was the one on Theobald Street. But of course, the director of HDL has left the council's employment. So we are left with a position where we could employ somebody else, we could develop it through asset management, or we could take the view that it is better developed. See, the head of asset management's looking worried. Or it is better use of our resources, our time and our effort to put this out to the market, which is what we're proposing to do. That gets houses delivered much more quickly, and as a standalone development, it gets houses built with social contribution too. So it is not going to be an entirely private development by any means. Moreover, the amount of revenue that the council can expect to have is considerably more than it was when the original HDL plan was put forward. So HDL is not an option. It hasn't got any staff. Well, it's got one member of staff. It hasn't got the capacity to build this. Asset management have got lots of work on and haven't got the spare capacity. So it is clear and obvious that we need to put this out to the market. We have a very good proposal, which we'll come to in part 2, and this is the best use of council resources. Thank you.
Councillor Matthews, did you want to say anything at this stage?
Simply say that this looks like a very good scheme. We minimise risk, and we are going to get affordable housing and some social rented housing on this site. So it's a good scheme.
Councillor Brisky.
Thank you, Leader. I will quickly make a comment before I have to dash off, and I'm happy to apologise if I perhaps made a mistake on the previous item, but my understanding was, and I have to say this isn't clear in the report, but it might be clearer in the Part 2 report, but my understanding was, based on what we were told at that meeting last month, was that we would receive a contribution for off-site affordable housing for this site. Is that not correct? But the report doesn't address this clearly. It talks about Section 106 affordable housing contributions, but I don't think it specifically says it will be delivered on site. So I'd like to clarify that.
What I can say is that I think we were clear at that meeting that we will continue to push for the best possible deal in terms of social and affordable housing. And again, without breaching the Part 2 stipulations, I'm looking at the formal offer in front of me now, and I can absolutely confirm that we will achieve as many affordable apartments on this site alone as the HDL proposal would have delivered across both of the sites, and a larger component of social rented tenure houses, that dwellings, than HDL would have achieved across both of the sites. So I think that's a pretty comprehensive win on all counts. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's really important to clarify at this point that this is Part 1. And when you do look at these Part 1 papers, which the residents have, so all my questions are going to be raised from the residents' gaze on reading this document, regardless of what I know in Part 2, this paper does not say anything about social housing under this site. It doesn't mention the amount of houses or what could go on this site, which is why these questions are coming up, because I know these will be answered in Part 2, but in this report that the public is reading, it doesn't say how many houses could go on this site, the tenure, the mix. It just simply doesn't say it. So I'll continue with what I'm saying, because I think the residents will want those answers. And then in Part 2, I know the answers are there, but they're not here now. So this is council-owned land in Bournemouth, land that belongs to Hertsmere's residents. And it's exactly that kind of ready-to-develop site that HDL was developed for, where we can deliver generally affordable or social rent homes and reinvest profits back into our communities. Instead, we're being asked to sell the site on the open market, and we're told that this represents the best consideration under the Local Government Act. But best consideration cannot simply mean the highest financial offer today. It must include long-term social value, the delivery of truly affordable or social rent homes, and the retention of value for Hertsmere's residents. If this land is viable enough for private developers to bid on, it must also be viable for the council to bid on, or HDL, or for a joint venture or partnership to deliver 100% affordable or social homes. Selling it for a one-off capital receipt does risk losing control and long-term benefit, especially if there's no firm guarantees of the 35% affordable housing mix that we want from a private purchaser, and in Part 1 it doesn't clarify that. We urge Cabinet to pause and reconsider. Is there an option for a joint venture here to be able to get all of the mix in there? Well, we don't know the mix, it's not in this Part 1 report. But you might not agree with my line of questioning tonight, but I assure you these are the questions that residents have from the public domain, and I just want to make that clear that I'm looking at this from a Part 1 gaze and not a Part 2 gaze where I know the answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Look, I think that there has to be a degree of understanding that when we are looking to achieve best value from council assets and doing that in an open market situation, it is an iterative, evolving process. We're operating in a commercial environment, and will be, or our team led by Andrew Don will be sort of pushing for the best possible deal right up until the point at which we sign on the dotted line. And commercial transactions don't always synchronise with council paper deadlines, and then of course we have the added set of problems around having to operate between the Part 1 and Part 2 stipulations. So I do appreciate why you are asking those questions, but I think I've been crystal clear tonight that we have continued to push right up to the line to improve this offer. We've already explained why the HDL option was not viable or deliverable. In terms of best consideration, I take your point, but what we are absolutely not allowed to do is to transfer or sell assets to any entity, including or especially a wholly owned council subsidiary, which is meant to operate at arm's length basis at a significant undervalue. And in this case, again, I'm restricted from disclosing the numbers, but this was an incredibly substantial quantum in terms of the undervalue that the HDL bid represented. And as I just confirmed to Councillor Brisky, and I've just been told by our Chief Executive that I can give the precise numbers, there will be 13 affordable apartments on the Directors Arms site itself, and about a third of those will be social rent tenure, and some of the balance of the 13 will also be shared ownership. And I stress that is on the one site, whereas that is the kind of quantum that HDL were looking at providing across both of the sites. We will have an expanded canvas for the medical provision that will make a diagnostic centre possible that would not have been possible on the basis of the space that was reserved in the HDL proposal. And one of the benefits of a diagnostic centre is people are aware the issue with delivering GP provision on the site is the Integrated Care Board had reached a settled position that they did not accept the need for new GP provision in South Boreham Wood. I think that's an astonishing conclusion. I think we're all agreed that we disagree with them. Nevertheless, it effectively triggered the need to sell the site when they solidified and crystallised their position that no GP surgery would be provided. But the advantage of a diagnostic centre is that diagnostic centres are not funded through ICB commissioning. They are funded by the GP practices who commission the diagnostic services directly themselves and pay for them directly from their own budgets, which enables GP provision to be provided as an added benefit. So, yeah, this is a triple win situation. It does tick all the boxes. I do appreciate why she's raised the questions, but we can either say that we are going to seek to tick every single communications and transparency box in the toolkit on one hand, or work solidly to some extent behind the scenes to get the best possible deal for residents on the other hand. And I think this is one of those cases where there's been a very difficult balancing act that I think we have managed to achieve. And the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, members. No, in which case are members happy to approve the sale of the land according to the plan in Appendix A and the terms outlined in the forthcoming Part 2 report. Secondly, to authorise our Head of Asset Management and Chief Finance Officer in consultation with myself and Councillor Matthews as the portfolio holder for housing and Councillor Shenton as our finance and budget portfolio holder to agree the detailed sales terms, and finally to authorise our legal team to do all the work necessary to give effect to the sale, including settling the detailed terms of the overage agreement and associated legal documents. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you, members. I will now move to agenda item 7.6, acquisition of a house in Bairstow Close in Boreham Wood. This again sort of covers my portfolio, Councillor Matthews' portfolio and Councillor Shenton's portfolio. To cut a very long story short, this is a case of acting on an opportunity that's presented itself to acquire a large 7-bedroom property and repurpose it for much needed housing in the area. The bulk of the finance for this purchase will be provided through application of a local authority housing fund grant, which will cover the certainly the significant amount of the cost of the purchase, and we're effectively asking Cabinet members this evening to enable us to proceed with this purchase. We have a desperate need to increase the supply of larger family homes and affordable housing within the borough. This is something that is a good purchase price in its own right, and the value for money for us is increased by our ability to apply the LAHF grant. It only requires moderate works, and the project is fully aligned with our housing strategy. Councillor Shenton.
Thank you. I was going to defer to Councillor Matthews as a housing man.
Councillor Matthews.
Okay, again, as with the previous report, this is really no-brainer. It's we're maximising government funds to carry out a conversion on this property, and just taking the opportunity to produce 2 large family units, which are where we have a desperate shortage. So it's a win-win for us.
Thank you. Visiting members, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I wish to speak in support of the proposed acquisition of the property in Bairstow Close, Boreham Wood. This is an excellent and timely opportunity for the Council to directly respond to the urgent housing needs of our borough. The property itself offers the potential to be converted to accommodate 2 families, which is precisely the kind of intervention that can make a real difference for households who have been waiting desperately for a home. We know the pressures on our housing system are significant. Families on the waiting list are living in temporary accommodation or overcrowded homes, often for years. Acquiring this property and using it to house 2 families not only provides immediate relief, but also demonstrates the Council's commitment to practical solutions that directly improve people's lives. It is also very positive to see that the local authority housing fund will be used to support this purchase. Using available public resources in this way is both responsible and forward-looking. It ensures that funding intended to tackle local housing shortages is applied directly where it is needed most, rather than being absorbed into longer-term development schemes that may take years to deliver. Beyond the immediate benefit, this acquisition is a cost-effective use of public funds. Converting an existing property into suitable accommodation for the families is far quicker and in many cases less expensive than building new homes from scratch. At the same time, it allows the Council to retain full control over tenure, management and ongoing support, guaranteeing that these homes remain available to those in genuine need. Thank you.
Councillor Sullivan, thank you for your support. Any further comments from members? Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Leader. I'm very pleased to hear that the Leader of the Opposition is supportive of this. Responsible and forward-looking. That's exactly what I would think with this as well. And I thought exactly the same thing about the Stratford Gate property in Potter's Bar when that was purchased back under the previous administration. And that administration wouldn't do anything in regards to social housing or affordable housing. It went straight on private, out for private rent. So it's nice to know that we are responsible and forward-looking as opposed to our predecessors. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from members? If there are none, as with previous reports, similar set of recommendations. Approve the acquisition of the property identified and on the basis outlined in the Part 2 report, subject subject to satisfactory due diligence and valuation. Authorise officers to undertake the conversion works. This will be set out in the Part 2 report. Approve the application of the local authority housing fund grant towards this particular purchase. Authorise the head of asset management, chief finance officer, in consultation with myself, Councillor Shenton and Councillor Matthews, to agree the detailed sales terms and on the initial acquisition, but in this case also subsequent sale based on red book value for affordable rent, and note that the sales proceeds from the completed units will replenish the council's capital receipts. Is that agreed? Thank you, members. We'll move to agenda item 7.7, the Bushy Golf and Country Club. This is the approval to enter into an exclusivity agreement with a development partner and approval to select commercial occupiers. This one comes under Councillor Shenton and myself, and I will pass to Councillor Shenton to introduce this item.
Thank you, Leader. It's been a long and winding road to get to this stage, but we are in the position now where we can, where we need to contract a partner who is willing to invest their own money, really, in moving this development on. We have a preferred food store and nursery occupier identified, which will be brought up in the Part 2 report, and we have a approved partner who has gone through the procurement process, the competitive tender, to fulfil this role. This is one of the largest developments in this borough over our tenure, and it is essential that we move forward and press on with it, or it's not going to get finished within our time. There have been suggestions of all the various different types of schemes that we could put in, the different sort of contractual basis, but that is not precluded by this recommendation. We're merely proposing that we appoint a preferred partner to move the project on. It's essential if we're going to get this done in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Morris.
Thank you. Well, I had written a very long speech, but I'm going to keep it short in the interest of I got another meeting to go to. First of all, I think I need to make very clear that I'm 100% behind developing this site and have been from day one. It is a very important site to Bushy. I'm not sure we've yet reached the point of knowing precisely what we're going to build there, but I think we're going in the right direction, and it has most definitely taken too long to get this far. However, there are a few issues that I have. I actually met with officers earlier this week to discuss my very significant concerns, and I'm pleased to hear you mentioning somewhat earlier the importance of achieving best value on all of our property interests. My concern here is a number of things, and let me take a step back. There is a very significant danger with this development, unless carefully managed, that it will have a very negative impact on the high street. That doesn't mean it shouldn't happen, because I think it should. My concern is that we have recently changed the parking regime there, and the impact that that has had is that you've had a pharmacy whose prescription issuing has dropped by 20%. You have a the dry cleaners of a similar amount, and you've got the Cowlings, the shop that sells bits and pieces, I would say. It's like a general store, has stopped hiring school personnel to work for work experience because they can no longer afford to. And I think it is really important to understand that with any development of any nature, you've got to apply Newton's theory of relativity insofar as there is an equal and opposite reaction to everything that you do. So I do have very significant concerns that by the time this development gets built and we see what is happening there, we could well have lost many of the shops in that part of the high street. That said, I'm very much behind the proposal in principle. However, when I met with officers earlier this week, my biggest concern was that no mention was made in the proposal, and there are 2 proposals coming forward, of a joint venture. And I'm not saying whether you should or you shouldn't, but if the Cabinet are not given the option and the facts as to what the ups and the downs are of pursuing that, which on a development that potentially has a return of between 80 and 100 million, and that is what you're looking at here, I am very concerned. However, so long as the assurances that were given to me at that meeting that this is only a preliminary process and that option will be provided to Cabinet at a subsequent meeting when the decisions are being made, I don't have a problem with it. So it would be helpful to have those assurances and an understanding that that is precisely what is going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morris, and thank you for your ongoing work on this site. Certainly, I remember being involved in your original working group back in 2017, indeed. And you're right, this has taken too long, although COVID did intervene in the middle. And look, I think it is a huge project and it is a complex project. And I know that as an administration, we are absolutely determined not to get lost in the complexity. We do accept that there are interrelationships, not just with other retail, parking and so on outlets in Bushey itself, but there are interrelationships with other community and retail facilities around the borough as a whole. And let's not forget, this is a site that is an asset of the borough as a whole, not just an asset of Bushey. Nevertheless, we have to work together in good faith to minimise and mitigate any potential risk created by those interrelationships, but we can't allow that to be an excuse for not delivering on this project. In terms of the assurance that you've asked for following your meeting with officers, that a report will come back to Cabinet setting out the possible longer-term delivery arrangements, joint venture or alternative configurations, I'd draw your attention to paragraph 3.4 of the report that I think very clearly and explicitly says that the work on the development agreement will be progressed throughout the period of the exclusivity agreement, being informed as it goes on by the outcomes of the work, but that either before or on completion of that period, a further report will be brought to Cabinet to seek approval to enter into the eventual development agreement, whatever shape that may take, and that is absolutely intended to solidify the commitment that that discussion will be had at an appropriate point, an appropriate juncture. Councillor Shenton, do you want to come back on any of Councillor Morris's points? Thank you. Members? Councillor Oakley?
Thank you, Leader. A great deal of work has actually gone into this particular project, and we are kind of in a chicken and egg situation here. We cannot progress the detailed plans unless we go through with the exclusivity agreement. In respect of how it's going to impact on the existing high street, I would actually suggest that the preferred supermarket option will actually draw in a great more people into the high street and make that high street much more viable. I'm not sure that the car parking thing is much of a an issue on here because we will have car parking provision on the site as well. It's an extraordinarily exciting scheme. It's going to have some amazing community facilities in there and provide an area where various aspects of Bushy can actually come together. It has been a long time coming, but it's on its way, and as already been said, reports will be brought back to Cabinet periodically as it progresses, but this is a really important stage we have to go through now if we are going to continue to progress this in the way that we have over the last couple of years.
Thank you. Councillor Richards.
Thank you, Leader. This is obviously great progress to see, and a clear manifesto commitment for the joint administration when we started out in 2023 to make progress happen. So I'm very, very heartened by this. I wanted to sort of, we've heard this argument around car park charges before, over and over again. If there's any new data that our friends in opposition could supply, but all the data that we've been informed about is increased footfall, increased usage of the car park. And, which council services should be reduced and have funding withdrawn from by subsidising, in a very unsustainable way, one or two car parks in one part of the borough. We need an equitable approach to our car parking charges. And I do respect Councillor Morris for all his work going back in terms of the consultation group. And I, not taking anything away from that, but it's really good to see this progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shenton.
Apologies, there was one point I wish to answer Councillor Morris. The usage of our car parks in Bushy has gone up in line with the car park usage in the rest of the borough. It is as high or higher than, irrespective of the fact that we put the prices up nearly 2 years ago now. So there has been no loss of usage of our car park by the increase in the prices. If there is an issue with footfall, it is more than likely due to competition from other suppliers, which is just how modern retail is.
Councillor Gray.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's very exciting to see that we reached another milestone on this journey, and not content with keep on kicking this can down the road and stall, delay and dither. It's a really exciting opportunity, and I'm looking forward to seeing this come to fruition. I think Councillor Morris is doing some very heavy lifting on the car parking issue. I mean, pharmacies across the country are struggling at the moment, mainly because anybody on long-term medication is encouraged to have it posted to them direct, free of charge, by most of the multinationals, including the NHS, which makes it far more convenient. And paying work experience people, again, is a bit of a strange one. But, who knows? If they stock the right products in the hardware shop, there will be opportunities when the development starts to be built out that they could tap into. So it could be really good news for them, not a negative story. Thank you.
Thank you. For no further comments from members, we're asking for your approval this evening to enter into the exclusivity agreement referred to with the developer, who is identified in the ubiquitous Part 2 section of the report. Secondly, to authorise our Head of Asset Management and Chief Finance Officer, in consultation with myself and Councillor Shenton, to finalise and sign off that exclusivity agreement. And thirdly, to approve the preferred food store and nursery occupiers, both of which we're very excited about and are identified in the Part 2 section of the report, and to authorise our Head of Asset Management and Chief Finance Officer, in consultation with Councillor Shenton and myself, to agree and enter into the respective agreements necessary to actualise that occupation, subject to completion of the development agreement. Is that agreed? Thank you. At this point, as we move on to the next agenda item 7.8, I wanted to particularly thank and pay tribute to our relatively new, I think still relatively new, head of asset management and engineering services. I've not done it on each of the past 4 or 5 items, but this has been an incredibly asset management heavy set of reports this evening in this sort of somewhat bumper agenda for the Cabinet meeting. And look, it's been a time of change across our sort of asset management function. I think it's taken a bit of time to steady the ship and start delivering on our commitment to sort of squeeze and sweat our assets to deliver maximum yield. But certainly since Andrew Don's arrival and the transformative changes that have been made in that department, it's evident from the reports that we've considered this evening and the progress that they represent that we are moving forward with vigour on that front. So to thank Andrew and his team for bringing all of these significant projects to the point at which they're able to obtain Cabinet approval this evening, and I know there are a number more in the pipeline moving forward. So I think those days of 7 p.m. Cabinet meeting finishes may be behind us, unfortunately. I'm now in a similar vein as we move on to item 7.8 regarding the establishment of our corporate programme management function, going to point out to the fact that precisely because we've been sitting here for 2 hours this evening and haven't quite yet got to the final part of the agenda is really part of the reason that we need to move forward with the establishment of a centralised corporate programme management function. I've said a couple of times before that in the build-up to the corporate peer review, 1 or 2 officers described us as an ambitious administration, which I thought was sort of classic local government or yes minister language for saying we're really trying to do too much and it's not going to happen. But I think the attitude we have taken is that if we're able to prove that we're able to deliver an ambitious, innovative and exciting programme of activities that are robustly and properly funded within the budgetary constraints in which we operate, we should not be afraid to ensure that our officers have the structural support framework to ensure that they can deliver at that kind of pace with the kind of effectiveness that they always seek and strive to achieve. And that's really what this centralised project management function is about. I'm not going to rehearse all of the detail that is set out in the report and the organogram, but effectively it stems from the process of the corporate peer challenge and the subsequent work that was done jointly by the Cabinet and the senior leadership team, supported by shared architecture services, our consultants, in implementing the key findings of the corporate peer challenge team from the LGA, one of which was to consider centralised mechanisms for standardising the way we do programme management and programme delivery to cover all of our new business on top of the sort of business as usual activities of the council, and to inject some much needed additional capacity within the organisation to drive forward our prioritised focus areas. The first stage of that exercise was the creation of the new director level role, our head of transformation and place, that we have successfully appointed and filled, and many of you have met Karim Pabani already. And really this structural addition is the second part of that exercise. As with all good local government initiatives, it comes with an acronym, and as my mind has gone completely blank. I'm going to go to the person who christened this, Ian, and ask him to remind us what GRIP stands for.
I think, well, GRIP was literally just meaning grip combined with focus and pace, but I think we did invent an acronym afterwards, which apologies, I can't recall right now.
That'll be why it's not mentioned in the report, but there is an acronym that I promise will surface. We've identified the funding sources that will enable us to kind of get on with this immediately, and as Ian said, that the clue is in the name. It is about a central grip of key projects and programmes to ensure they're delivered to a uniform level and a standard level of rigour, coherence, and that the speed and pace that is required to deliver many of them, or at least get them to a point of beyond no return in advance of the local government reorganisation implementation, is something that we are able to achieve. Ian.
Well, one of my colleagues has remembered. Goals, resources, implementation, progress.
That's the one. That's the one, yeah. And it will go on a graphic somewhere and not be forgotten again. Visiting members, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, it's a shame that Hilary Shade isn't in the room, because I wanted to start by thanking her for her continued... Is she in the room? You're hiding, Hilary. I'll start again. I'd like to start by thanking Hilary Shade for her continued leadership and dedication in progressing Hertsmere's response to the Corporate Peer Challenge. Her work has clearly contributed to improve governance, delivery, and creating healthy working environments for her peers. So thank you, Hilary. The creation of the Director of Transformation role was a major step, one intended to provide the very capacity, coordination, and delivery oversight of major projects within their remit. So tonight you're being asked to approve £260,000, including a new team, a £100,000 flexible fund, and significant structural change. So I've just got a few questions for Cabinet tonight. How does this proposal directly support Hertsmere's service delivery priorities? And critically, how will success be measured? Will projects be delivered faster, more efficiently, more innovatively? And what difference will our residents actually see? We also need to consider the operational impact. GRIP represents a new way of working for many service leads. Are all the service leads and head of services on board, and do they feel aligned to this new way of working? And finally, what role will scrutiny play? This proposal introduces new reporting structures, performance frameworks, and escalation pathways. But what formal space will scrutiny have in this? As elected members, we have a duty to ensure that frameworks are transparent, open to challenge, and accountable to those outside of the Cabinet. So to be clear, I don't propose the idea of improving project delivery, but did have those questions. Thank you.
Sorry, could you just repeat what the first of the 4 questions was? I didn't quite catch it.
It was, how does this proposal directly support Hertsmere's service delivery priorities, and how will we measure success? How will residents see? Will that be through them being delivered faster, more efficiently, more innovatively?
Thank you. And first of all, I will echo your thanks to both Hilary Shade and Liz Gore for the tremendous support that they have provided and continue to provide in implementation of the recommendations of the Corporate Peer Challenge team. Obviously, the key when you get these reports is not to let them gather dust on the shelf. It was an overwhelmingly positive report, but I think the innovative ideas that they suggested around how we can best address resource issues and support service delivery were the real kind of nuggets of gold that we sought to grab. And I think that's really the answer to the first of your 4 questions, which is that the view of senior officers was that service delivery in terms of business as usual was being impacted by the sheer weight of new and additional projects that were emerging onto the corporate agenda. And as I said, the appointment of the additional director was the first part in addressing this. This is the second part of the jigsaw, and the way that this will directly support service delivery is it will create new resource that will be targeted very specifically and directly at that non-business as usual or business as usual plus element of the council's work. And that is the exact pinch point that the corporate review team and officers identified as needing to be addressed, and it will do that in two ways, partly by effectively giving us a centralised project and programme management team that will take on some of the responsibility for both direct delivery but also perhaps more critically ensuring that we're sufficiently strong on process to get projects over the line, but also secondly the institution of the Flexi Fund that the GRIP team will be able to deploy where particular projects or work streams need a swift injection of additional resource to help them get over an unexpected hurdle, an intractable problem or seemingly intractable problem or a bump in the road. So I think that there's a very sort of specific couple of ways in which we anticipate this improving service delivery, and the setting out of consistent processes and mechanisms for advancing projects will greatly aid us in terms of monitoring and measuring and quantifying success or otherwise. Second question, I mean, yes, effectively, all of the above that you set out, I think, will be achieved by this initiative. Thirdly, not only are all our directors and heads of services on board, as reported previously to Cabinet and to Council, the management board has been completely restructured to ensure that all of our heads of service and senior leadership, senior management team members sit as permanent members of the management board rather than simply engaging with the management board on reports relevant to their portfolio. And it is that board, in fact, really one of the first decisions of that board was to hone this proposal and bring it forward. So this has really emerged out of probably one of the most detailed joint officer member processes that's happened at that level for quite some time. How will this, or how will the role of scrutiny map onto this? Look, I think to some extent that's a question for scrutiny to decide, but what I would say is that I think this framework actually provides a massively enhanced ability for scrutiny to get under the bonnet of key projects. I think that the emergence of a consistent set of metrics, dashboards and mechanisms for moving projects forward will lend itself to not just the extended scrutiny start and finish groups, but the ability for scrutiny to dip in and probe particular not even particular projects, but even particular elements of particular projects at relatively short notice. We've seen this already with asset management developing a departmental-wide project and programme board, and the kind of rigour and queryable data that produces. Look, beyond that, I think there are other opportunities for scrutiny to enhance the work that it does in the context of the recommendations of the sort of corporate peer challenge, and you know, perhaps it's somewhat disappointing that scrutiny themselves haven't come forward or met with Cabinet for some time to suggest how that might work, but I think it's right and proper that Cabinet doesn't interfere or seek to set out the framework in which scrutiny operate, but that they proactively look at the way they intend to operate and discuss that with us bilaterally. Members, Councillor Gray.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it's really welcoming to see this paper in front of us this evening. One of the many strands that came out of the Corporate Peer Challenge, where I know many in opposition were against, thinking it was just some little fluff piece report that we would never actually act upon. I'm really pleased to see that both the administration and the senior management of this council has taken this on board and are all working and pulling in the same direction to make our council as agile as we possibly can. I do want it on the record, though, and yes, this sits squarely in Hillary's team, but Liz Gore has been the absolute thread and needle that has run through this entire process, from setting up the Corporate Peer Challenge and all the work that went into that and facilitating it, right through to the implementation and pulling all of those strands together and producing intelligent and easy digestible information and helping shape what we're doing going forward. And without that kind of support, we wouldn't be where we were. So I'd just like that noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further comments from members? No, in which case we are asking Cabinet to approve the proposals for the establishment of the new function and the implementation of the operating model that's set out in the appendix of the report, and to approve the recommendation to full council for the funding of £260,000 in total as set out in paragraph 8 for approval. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you, members. We'll now move on to agenda item 8, which is non-key decisions. First of which is our climate change strategy and action plan progress update. And I will ask Councillor Richards to present this item.
Many thanks, Chair, and I appreciate the agenda is particularly long today, but I wanted to take time out firstly to thank our Climate Change and Sustainability Officer, Sarika Jain, for her sterling work on not just this, but in general, the work that's involved in working with the various council departments, as this is really a key plank in how we approach things. I also want to thank the Climate Change Panel members for their input. It's been a very valuable exercise. Whilst we are presenting an updated climate change and sustainability strategy, I would commend and indeed position this as an action plan for supporting a just and equitable transition, looking at saving residents money on increased energy efficiency with benefits for economic growth, the related new green skills required, as well as increased community health and well-being and borough resilience. 5 years after the council declared on an all-party basis, at least as it was, a climate emergency and committed to net zero emissions, we are updating our approach. While our overall borough emissions have reduced, this updated strategy significantly accelerates our commitment. This roadmap is built on 6 critical priorities, addressing both the council's direct control, and generally for local authorities comprise between 2 and 4% of overall emissions, greenhouse emissions, but just as importantly, if not more so, the wider sphere of influence across the borough. Priority 1, reducing council emissions. The council has achieved a 17% reduction in its direct, that's scope 1 and 2, emissions since 2019. To meet our targets, we must double our rate of emissions reduction, focusing at the earliest on the transition of the fleet and implementing comprehensive decarbonisation plans for all council assets, including leased properties like leisure centres, where indirect or scope 3 emissions are nearly 3 times that of our direct emissions. Priority 2, promoting sustainable transport. Transport accounts for nearly 50% of the borough's total emissions. This priority focuses on collaborative efforts with the county council to implement the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, expanding public cycle hire through Beryl, and further facilitate the rollout of electric vehicle charging points across Hertsmere. Priority 3, improving energy efficiency and renewable capacity. With domestic energy consumption being higher than regional averages, this priority emphasises partnerships to secure funding for retrofitting vulnerable and fuel-poor homes. We will also facilitate the deployment of renewable energy generation, such as solar PV, and ensure all new developments adhere to high energy efficiency and sustainable standards, leading to net zero carbon builds. Priority 4, minimising waste and implementing the circular economy. We will reinforce targets for recycling rates, currently just over the national average, and actively promote reuse and repair initiatives to ensure resources remain in circulation. Priority 5, climate adaptation and resilience. This focuses on preparing the borough for the impacts of a 2-degree increase, 2-degree increase in temperatures by 2050, which the message has just this week been reinforced in a letter from the Climate Change Committee to Minister Emma Hardy, that we are already experiencing more frequent extreme weather, and we, as a nation, need to be ready. Key actions include conducting an annual climate change risk assessment, increasing tree planting and urban greening, and ensuring emergency plans are robust. Importantly, we'll conduct an equalities impact assessment to protect vulnerable community members through a just transition. And finally, priority 6, last but not least, supporting nature recovery and sustainable food production. This strategy commits to implementing a comprehensive tree and hedgerow strategy, which we are already implementing, targeting a 7% increase in canopy cover by 2041. It also includes developing biodiversity strategy for parks and green spaces and securing mandatory biodiversity net gain in all new developments, often in excess of statutory requirements. In summary, this strategy shifts us from a mobilisation phase to an accelerated action. It provides a detailed plan, targets and framework for partnership required to make Hertsmere a sustainable borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Richards. Visiting members, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. As a member of the Climate Change Panel, I've had the opportunity to see the work that's gone into this, and I want to thank Sarika and her team for their dedication in producing such a comprehensive document. This plan strikes a great balance. It sets a clear route to net zero, but it also acknowledges all the pillars of sustainability, not just the headline-grabbing initiatives we often see. It focuses on community engagement, communication, and the small wins that don't cost our residents money, but can create a real shift in mindset and behaviour. Much of this work has already got underway. Many of us have undertaken net zero and climate change training with the amazing David Hawes, who really opened our minds to just how far-reaching these issues are. It is clear that this is not just about limiting emissions, it is about reshaping how we live, work and plan for the future. From planning and biodiversity net gain in our borough to embedding sustainability across council operations, this is a truly holistic plan. Its success relies on bringing people together whilst also addressing the large ticket items, how the council works efficiently, how sustainability is embedded into procurement, and how planning and SPDs incorporate these principles. There is a huge opportunity in the green economy within our borough, opportunities for new jobs, innovation and investment that we should not miss. Net zero is not just a challenge, it is a chance to grow our local economy sustainably while delivering tangible benefits to our residents. Despite the national political debates, as a member of the Conservative Environmental Network, I firmly believe that we have a responsibility, regardless of other countries and their usage, to leave as light a footprint as possible on our planet, while ensuring healthy, safe and thriving lives of our residents. This climate action plan allows Hertsmere to lead the way, not only through our day-to-day operations, but also as we transition through local government reorganisation and beyond. It is ambitious, practical and community-focused, and I'm confident it will make a real difference if we continue to implement it effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Members. Councillor Giorgio.
Thank you, Councillor Newmark. I'm very pleased to see this report because it's so important for our borough and actually for the whole world that we really do everything we can to reduce our things like greenhouse gas emissions and help our environment as much as possible. Looking at the report, some of the things that are in here, we've already made some great progress against. One of the items in here that showed that one of the largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions is from transport in our borough, and I'm very pleased to hear about some of the progress we've made recently with things like our electric vehicle chargers. I actually had a comment from a resident today asking about when they're going to be available, because many of them have actually been installed already, and I appreciate that that's something that's going to be available perhaps next month. So I'm really pleased that we've already made some great progress there. There is a part in here as well that talks about the usage of our diesel vehicles for waste collection. I would love to have seen us using electric vehicles, but I understand that there were very long lead times in doing that, and so we weren't able to do that. But actually, by going to more efficient vehicles, we've again already managed to make massive savings in our greenhouse gas emissions in the meantime, rather than waiting for something that might take a long time for us to be able to get them. There are other areas in here which I'm really pleased to see as well, and in terms of things like us having solar panels on top of new builds of roofs and things like that, and that will help reduce our residents' domestic greenhouse gas emissions as well, because things like heating and electricity use is one of the largest home sources of greenhouse gas emissions. I'd like to see us do some more with things like heat pumps in the borough. Again, homes, we do have a scheme to help homes install solar panels on their roofs. If we could also help work with schemes to help people replace their gas boilers more with heat pumps, and likewise also for some of the council facilities such as the Firstfield Centre, things like the pools are often very expensive to heat and use gas to heat those pools. If we could do more to provide their heating and heating of pools using heat pump technology, there's both environmental saving, but also there could be in the long term be a financial saving, which would help some of those facilities to continue operating and providing the services to our residents. So I'm very pleased with this report overall, and I give my thanks as well to Councillor Richards for providing it to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Oakley.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of this for some really hard work. I have to confess my contribution to this was really quite tiny in respect of buses, but we have made significant inroads into increasing public transport provision. Some of it won't be coming online just yet. It will be perhaps 2 years. As we see new developments being built out, we will see considerable numbers of extended bus routes and new bus routes. I'm pleased to say that we have actually got some funds towards our town centre hybrid hoppers. Again, we'll probably have to wait 2 years to see them come along. What we have actually seen more recently is actually the introduction of electric buses. All of the TfL buses that we have in our borough are all electric, and Uno Bus have just taken delivery of 22 electric buses, some of whom appear on routes 603, 242 and 243 across the borough. Unfortunately, we do have 3 private operators who have significant gas guzzlers, and we would like to think that in the future they manage to secure investment in order to move to more suitable vehicles.
Thank you. Just wanted to echo the thanks to Councillor Richards and Dr. Sarika Jain for the sterling work that's gone into taking this forward. I think that amongst the sort of plethora of the more mundane day-to-day business as usual, it is important to receive these semi-regular update reports and remind ourselves that we did declare a climate emergency. We did commit as an administration to enhancing and upgrading and expanding the work that we do on this agenda. And I think in terms of coming back on Councillor Giorgio's point around the leisure centres, I believe I'm right in saying that we funded the installation of combined heat and power units across our leisure centre estate that's obviously operated by Inspire All. So I think that's a really positive piece of progress on that front. So if there are no further comments, I think that we are asking members this evening to simply note the update report as attached to Appendix 1 of your papers. Is that agreed? Thank you, members. Right, we have dealt with 8.2, so we will...
Yeah, just sorry, on that point, Councillor Sullivan said earlier on that the information I was looking for was in the pack produced at the Policy Review Committee. I've just had a little look, and all that's in there is the terms of understanding, the first draft of the report that was submitted this evening, and some minor grammatical changes in the minutes. The nuts and bolts and the kind of workings out is not part of that pack. So if you could...
Yeah, I think I'm hearing from our head of Democratic Services that the document does exist and will be circulated to Cabinet members. Is that? Yeah, and I think it's right that in the past there's been a cover report that are drafted by officers, but the members of task and finish groups have generally sort of presented a sort of fuller report, and if we can get that circulated, that will be appreciated. Right, Microsoft E3 Enterprise Agreement renewal. I'm not even going to attempt to summarise this. I'm just going to pass to Councillor Giorgio, who, together with our head of digital transformation and IDS, Lee Gallagher, will explain what it all means.
Thank you, Councillor Newmark. So this is a very routine thing to do as part of our package with Microsoft that gives us access to things like Microsoft Office and some of the security software that we use in order to make sure that we keep our councillors and our staff safe on using their computers. We have to renew that agreement with Microsoft in order to make sure that we can keep access to some of that software that we use every day in order to do our jobs. The E3 kind of license as such is not the most expensive license. It's a little bit cheaper than what we could have spent. It's a bit cheaper than like the E5 licenses. It does mean that we don't have some of the features maybe around some of the AI features and some of the security features that you can get with E5 licenses, but generally I think it gives very good value to the council and actually provides us with most of the services that Microsoft provides that we would probably use on a day-to-day basis, things like desktop software packages and things like that most of our staff would regularly use. I will also just point out that the terms being renewed is for 3 years with the option to renew for a further year and then a further year after that if we should so wish. The reason for that is partially because of local government reorganisation. If we were to merge with any other authorities, they could then review those licenses at that point and make a decision whether or not they wanted to flex up or flex down on the type of license that they were using, or if they wanted to renew as a group together, or if we were to merge our licenses and therefore maybe also have greater savings, because usually with Microsoft, the more licenses you're purchasing, then the cheaper unit cost you'll get per license. So that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you. If we have, I think, lost our visiting member for the time being, I will ask if members have any comments on this report. I'm seeing lots of shaking heads, so we are asking members to note the current E3 Microsoft Software Enterprise Agreement renewal for Microsoft Office Server, Azure Cloud, Microsoft Project, Visio, Power BI, Copilot software licensing. Note the term being renewed is for 3 years with optional 2+1s at the end of that from November of this year through to October 28. Total cost of almost £141,000 per annum across the length of the license and allowing for annual adjustments, running to a total cost of almost £423,000. We're noting that these costs can already be met in full from the existing IDS budget, and to note that the renewal has been approved and signed via appropriate waiver process for a direct award under an approved framework, which I think means we need to vote in favour of this or we have a problem. Is that agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 8.4, Hertsmere Borough Council's response to the General Equality Duty 2024-25. This is something that we have to do on an annual basis in terms of noting our activity during the past year that has contributed towards meeting our key equality objectives and statutory duties. I'd like to thank Hilary Shade and Jyoti, who has joined us from her team, who have put this report together, and ask them if there is anything particular that they would like to highlight. No, I'm seeing shaking heads. I'm going to take the report as read. Effectively, it sets out in great detail how we have complied with our public sector equalities duty. I know it's sort of late in the evening, but I do want to stress that this is something that we take incredibly seriously, and it can't and shouldn't simply be a tick box exercise. There's some really important stuff across all of the protected characteristics by the Equalities Act. Particularly pleased to see the work that we have done on equal pay and gender pay reviews, the progress we've made on things like the women's safety talks, the work on Holocaust Memorial Day, obviously the work that's going on right now around marking Black History Month, and probably with global events and the recent terror attack in Manchester, it's important to highlight the ongoing efforts around community cohesion following the terror attacks in southern Israel by Hamas on the 7th of October 2023. The paragraph on equalities impact assessment often gets tucked away at the end of our decision reports, but having had to write to or prepare a letter to the leader of the county council today on a matter of extreme significance around equalities impact and community cohesion, where a report's been brought forward without an equalities impact assessment. I know that we are more on this, even in this day and age, than many other local authorities in the area, and I'm really deeply appreciative to our officer team for the work that is being done in this particular arena. Visiting members, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got one small amendment because I don't think the team have really shouted out about everything that they have put on social media posts. So we've missed out that we have done posts for Ash Wednesday, Easter and Christmas. So they have been missed out from the Christian community, which is a large percentage of our population in the borough. So I don't think we've shouted enough about everything that we've done in some of these boxes. But certainly under the social media posts there on page 223, we could add that in. Thank you.
No, I think that's really important, and we did commit to do that last year, and we did it. I do think it's important that we accept that amendment into the report. Harvey, how do we do that? It's the report's in my name, I think. Can I?
Yes, you can work with Jyoti to approve a change.
We shall agree that change, and if you're happy to, I'll delegate that to officers to include the appropriate wording or bullet points. Councillor Gray.
Yeah, thank you again, Chair. Like you say, it's very hard to kind of convey what we actually do in a report like this, and actually what we actually see here in Hertsmere is we've actually embedded a lot of this into the culture of what we do at the council. I think special thanks needs to go to Councillor Louise Nicholas for leading as member champion on violence against women and girls. The amount of work that she's doing and the strands she's pulling together there. Not only is she pulling together a team to do bystander training for all schools, we've had drugs and alcohol and education talks about cuckooing and county lines. Various strands to that piece of work, and she has really been the the absolute driving force behind that, with a very, 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 very qualified team behind her, sitting under Hillary. So, yeah, it's quite a dry read report, and it sounds a bit tick-boxy, but it certainly isn't. I see it day in, day out that we embed this in the culture of the council here, but there's always more to do, is what I'd say.
Thank you. Are members happy to agree the recommendation, which is simply to note Hertsmere's response to the general equality duty for the previous year? Thank you. We will now move on, having covered agenda item 8.6. Sorry, we've done 8.6. Absolutely right, Harvey. We will now come on to 8.5, the establishment of the Community Safety Grant Fund. This marks part of the Council's response to the jihadist terror attack on a synagogue in Manchester 2 weeks ago on the festival of Yom Kippur. Clearly, as the borough that is home to one of the largest Jewish populations in the country, this horrific attack had a knock-on impact and has created a significant chill factor and sense of vulnerability for local Jewish communities, and particularly around local synagogues and community institutions. As a cabinet, and not just as a cabinet, actually working on a cross-party basis, and I'd like to particularly thank Councillor Sullivan for her proactive work and support over the past couple of weeks on these issues. We really had two key planks of our response, the first of which is to allocate £50,000 from our general contingency fund to create a community safety grant fund, a fund that will be drawn upon by local synagogues that are primarily to make additional provision around security measures on top of what already exists, and on top of what's already funded and provided either by community institutions or central government. The prime use of this fund, it's anticipated, will be to purchase stab-proof vests for security volunteer teams, bulletproof vests, and emergency medical kits for knife and bullet wound treatment. Obviously, this is a situation that we never had anticipated or hoped we would ever have to be in this country. Nevertheless, I believe it is the right decision to have taken. Though Chief Executive and myself have powers to make emergency funding allocations of up to £20,000 each, we decided that the urgency of the situation merited an announcement of the £50,000 grant, which effectively we underwrote £40,000 of it from our emergency allocation, but we're now coming to Cabinet to allocate not just the balance, but the entire sum from the contingency fund. I can't think of a more appropriate use for a contingency fund other than a key community safety measure. Obviously, we have sort of some in the region of 18 synagogues across the borough. As another plank of our response, a number of councillors, Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Shenton, Councillor Gray, Councillor Oakley, Councillor Richards, and possibly others that are Councillor Giorgio, Councillor Matthews, Councillor Clapper, and Councillor Rani visited various synagogues for Saturday morning services on the day, 2 days immediately after the attacks. I think that this was also deeply appreciated by the communities visited, and an extended programme of such visits is now being looked at over the coming weeks. And we also welcome the additional funds that the Prime Minister has announced within the past 24 hours that will be distributed via our partners at CST, Community Security Trust, in order to strengthen the security infrastructure protecting our schools, synagogues and community buildings at this difficult time. That additional funding will be on top of the £18 million annual grant provided primarily to secure Jewish schools, which I know the 3 Jewish schools in our borough benefit from substantively. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to say very quickly that I'm really saddened that this is even a consideration that this would ever be needed. And of course, our group fully support this funding going forward.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Gray.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I kind of echo Councillor Sullivan's words. It's not a pleasure to be able to authorise £50,000 to be spent in this way. Everybody of every faith should feel free to worship in their place of worship, free from the threat of immediate terror acts. And unfortunately, our vibrant Jewish community can't do that. So, yes, I was very pleased to go on the visits with yourself and other ward members and councillors, and genuinely, genuinely thought it was an exercise that we did that was really worthwhile. But words only go so far, and I think it's important sometimes to stand up and actually do something practical, and this is a really practical measure that we can do to allow them to buy the equipment they need to keep their communities safe. So I'm fully supporting it.
Thank you. Anything further from members? Nope. In which case I'm asking, or we are asking members to ratify the creation of a community safety grant fund of up to £50,000 for the purpose set out in the report, and to note the source of the funding will be from the general contingency budget. Is that agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 9. Any other business that the Chair considers urgent? There is none. Agenda item 10, date of next meeting. Just a slight correction to what is published in the papers. The next scheduled meeting of Cabinet will be on the 12th of November 2025 at 6 p.m. There will then be, this has already been notified, an additional meeting of Cabinet scheduled to take place on the 19th of November, immediately after the conclusion of the extraordinary council meeting. And the next meeting of Cabinet scheduled after that will resume with a 6 p.m. start on the 10th of December, and that will be our last Cabinet meeting of the calendar year. We've got through a bumper agenda tonight, but lots of important and significant work going on. So thank you very much for your patience. We haven't quite finished yet. I'm going to ask members and relevant officers to stay behind for us to discuss the part 2 items of the relevant asset management reports. There are 4 of them. So the recommendation is that under section 100A, clause subsection 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business: 11.1, 11.2, 11.3 and 11.4. Is that agreed? Are people happy to... Sorry, is the webcast off?